I feel Applicant Lab was much better than any the commission consultants I hired last year.
Last year, this Applicant Lab user wasted thousands of dollars on a so called elite admissions consulting firm and did not get any acceptances. This year, he used Applicant Lab and not only got into 3 schools, but also got into one of his top choices with a significant scholarship. In this interview, he compares and contrasts his experience working with an expensive firm and how Applicant Lab was not only a small fraction of the price, but that he felt that the advice in it was far better than what his overpriced consultant had given him the year before.
To be honest, personally, I feel that you really don't need any admission consultant if you want to reach that destination. So if you have that destination in your mind, I can promise you that Applicant Lab tool can help you reach there and you will never be demotivated.
It's great to see you. How are you?
Hi, Maria. It's great to see you too. How are you? I'm fine.
All right. I am doing well, thank you. So I think some congratulations are in order. You have gotten into some really great business schools in the US. You've gotten into Indiana Kelley and Emory, Goizetta. And what's even more impressive about this accomplishment is that last year, I believe you applied to several MBA programs, and last year you didn't have quite as much luck. So can you tell me a little bit first, before we jump into how Applicant Lab helped you this year, can we talk a little bit about what your process was last year and how you went about your admissions journey last year?
Yes, sure. So last year, when I was done with my GMAT, I selected a couple of business schools. Like there were 7 business schools that I, selected, and I took a help of an admission consultant because I wasn't aware what is the process. And when we ask essays, I've heard a lot of things that the business school essays have to be very specific. They don't have to be any general kind of information. So you have to relate everything, make a story, and provide it to the school. So I heard a lot about that from GMAT Club. So I thought, okay, let's go for a consultant. Looking at the reviews, talking to a couple of people, I hired one of the very famous admission consultant in US, and I had a confidence that okay, if I hire them, I'll get something out of it. So when I talked to them, I got to know that their prices were very high, and it was $2,200 per school, and which is way too much for Indians, especially for me, working in an IT job. So despite that fact, I just hired them and asked them for one of the school's help. Since I wasn't aware of any process, I thought whatever that person was telling me is great, and he helped me build a resume, and he helped me make the essay of one of the schools, and he first asked me to write down everything on a paper, whatever you think about it, and then he said that okay, we have 4 or 5 edits in this package that will be covered, and we will help you in get the process done. So I wrote everything, whatever came to my mind. Then he provided some edits, and so it was a lot of work. But he simply told me to write everything, whatever you think you can write, which was like an open-ended question where I was not given any specific direction on what things needs to be written. If so, it was like I did some research. I wasn't much aware of how to relate my past, my present to my future, how to relate every point, how to relate the courses, the clubs, and all. I just kept on writing the things like that. So when I worked with him, he first helped me make we reached a point where he made certain edits. I was not comfortable. I asked him certain questions. He was giving very general answers. There wasn't any specific that I should be given. Those things were missing. So there came a point when when we were done with the 5 edits, and I asked him that, can you provide me, I'm still not comfortable, or I need more help. And they were asking me for more money and all. which I thought at a point that there isn't any worth, because it's going to be very open ended. He's going to give me very general advice, and what I have heard so far that is that you have to be very specific for the school and tell that why this particular school and how you think this is the school you want, right? So all those things were missing. And but since I haven't worked with anyone else before, so this was my first time, I thought, okay, whatever he guided me was the best, and I replicated the same process for the others. So I applied to 7 schools. So he helped me in one school, and I replicated the process for the other 6 schools. Okay, so I was done, and I paid him those dollars and everything. And the my bad luck, or I would say, I didn't realize. I was like, okay, it's my bad luck. I didn't hear from any of the schools, not even the interview calls. So and I got so much demotivated. But I was just cursing myself that, oh, this guy has helped me a lot, and blah blah. But it's just that it's my bad luck. And that's how I was not able to get any interview call, and that was my perception last year, post rejection from all the 7 schools.
Okay. So
So
that's
that was my
sort of
past experience.
right. So that was obviously a really disappointing result. And I think one of the things that's important that you said is that, because I think sometimes people, there's a misconception that, oh, if I hire an admissions consultant, first of all, they have some sort of secret insider knowledge, which often isn't true. And second of all, they're going to do the work for me. Like, I'm just going to give them the money and they're just going to do the work for me, and I won't have to do a whole lot. Like, they're going to save me all this time. But it sounds like, at least in your case, the person was like, well, you need to do this. You need to do the research. You need to look up all
Yes.
the information. So I think we can come back to that, I think, a little bit later when we talk a little bit about Applicant Lab. So then the following year, this most recent year, you found Applicant Lab, which is the product that I've developed, which is essentially a do-it-yourself tool with a series of exercises where you walk through, and you're doing all of the work, but I, Maria, am guiding you using videos of myself or exercises or all kinds of different things to help you craft the story that schools really want to see, and to talk about the examples from your profession that schools are truly interested in. So can you talk me through how the Applicant Lab platform helped you, and which elements of it you thought were the most useful?
Sure. So, how it helped me, I would like to tell that, I mean, what was my first impression when I came across the tool Applicant Lab, and then how my impression got strengthened, and, I got, so I would like to talk about that. So, when I was rejected, I was demotivated, then I talked to a couple of people. So there was one person on GMAT Club. He worked on Applicant Lab the same year I was working on with the admission consultant, and I talked to him. I had around a more than an hour call with him, and we discussed that how Applicant Lab helped him. So I was like, okay, maybe how can, I was dicey that how can a tool can help? How can, this is an automated tool. There's no feeling, no expression. How can this tool help me out?
Yeah, I get that a
So
lot.
then
I hear that a
then I
lot.
talked
Yeah.
to a couple. So I talked to a couple, another person, like very close of a member of my GMAT club team. So when I talked to him, he also suggested that he was working with Applicant Lab, and he said that, hey, let's try that out. Okay. So what I did, I just went ahead and thought, okay, there's a free trial going on. Let's look at the beginning. Let's look at the initial videos and try to see what's happening, right? So when I started looking at that, I was still not very comfortable. I would say my comfort level was hardly 10% when I just started using it. I was not confident about it. Obviously, coming from such a big disaster, it was like, now how can a tool help me when a person in real was not able to help me, right?
Right.
So then when I talked to, I was talking to that person continuously, and he said, go ahead and just spend those few bucks, and it doesn't matter. You have already spent huge amount of money, so how would that make difference if you just spend a couple of few more dollars, right? So I said, okay, let's go for it. So the moment I just bought it, I started with my resume module. So I thought, okay, let's see how my resume would go. So I was pretty much confident on what resume that consultant helped me the previous year. I thought this is the best resume he helped me made. But when I actually saw the resume module, I just realized that my resume last year was a disaster. It was full of unnecessary, full of technical jargons, full of, you know, tightly compact, no spacing. And that is where I realized that, oh, this is what applicant lab. I get, my confidence, my comfort level was 10%. Now it moved to around 30%. That, okay, resume module looks better. Let's make the resume. So I made my resume and it looked way fine. I just forwarded my resume to a couple of people, current students of a couple of schools. They compared the two resumes and everyone asked me, hey, did you really apply with this resume last year? I said I had nothing to say. They said this is the current resume that you have made is pretty much decent, and this is what B School is looking for. So, and everyone gave me the same feedback on which the same thing in which you were saying, that consider your resume is reading someone is reading your resume at 5 p.m. on a Friday evening, so tired, and so think about it. If you just pull in lots of bits of information, how would that person will just reject it out and say, hey, I am not going to read it. So that actually I understood, and that really made me feel a bit more confident. Then I thought, okay, resume module is good, but really essays, how can that will help me out. So I started like, as the applicant lab tool is progress, like we have initial career vision modules, and then some brainstorming, pre-thinking, all those modules. So I just started like there were, like, if I talk about the brainstorming module we have, there were lots of questions like think about this time, think about that time, so I was like, I was watching all the videos and I was like, okay, I mean, it really forced me, to think more and more on the things. I mean, I was given the direction, but it really forced me. And I realized that my consultant last year, first, he didn't give me any direction. He just said, write down whatever you think, write down whatever you think, right? Secondly, he never forced me to, go in that particular direction. But the applicant lab tool brainstorming session, somehow it forced me. I was not still very, I was like, hey man, this is too much. It's forcing me a lot to think about how is this going to help me out. I mean, think about time X, Y, Z and all. How would that help me out? But my confidence level, my comfort level was shooted up when I started my essay module, my pre-writing stage, where I started with one of the school's essay. And it was like, if the question is why MBA, what the school is looking at, if I talk about Tuck, or if I talk about Emory, what Emory is looking at, what features Emory is looking at, or what features Tuck is looking at, they were completely different, and they were well explained. That, hey, Emory is looking for, let's say, leadership development. So you have to make sure that your essays speak about leadership, right? So if Tuck is about cohortness, it's talking about team. Tuck is all about team. Your essay should talk about teams. It should not be a generic essay that, oh, let's make every essay a leadership essay, like I did last year, right? So those things, plus what are the things you need to think. I mean, your videos, the kind of examples you have given, that really helped me think about that, how can I relate this with my past experiences, what I'm doing right now, with so that I make a very good story. So see, I am from a healthcare background, and and I have a very big like, since childhood I'm very very much into health, maintaining my health and all those things. So Applicant Lab tool really helped me make a story that actually started as a healthcare, as a health enthusiastic person when I was hardly 10 years old to what I am today. So, there was a direct link of my entire healthcare story and why I want to move on to, go ahead with the healthcare. So there was a direct link that was being made. But this was nowhere there. My goals were different last year, and there was no relationship that was being developed with my past, with my present, and future. So this is where Applicant Lab helped me make a story. And then now when I moved to pre-writing stage, and when I was writing on leadership stuff, all the brainstorming that was done in the previous modules, that was brought forward. So
Right.
then I realized, oh, all the efforts that I was doing, I was getting bored that, hey, what I'm doing right now, all those efforts paid me off while writing the essay, because the purpose of getting brainstorming that information was to make you write essays very easily. So that was very helpful. Second thing, if I talk about the other essays, like how will you contribute to our school. So if I talk about that, those kind of essays, Applicant Lab has actually given the direct lens. So I don't have to just write on Google clubs of Emory, special programs, leadership programs of Emory. I don't have to do all those things because those directions has already been given to me by Applicant Lab. So I just have to, go over those links. I have to look for which one of these links with my goals. I have to just pull in the information and tell the why part, right? I remember in one of the essays last year, it was how will you contribute to our school, and or it was like why that particular school. And everywhere, I in my last year's essay I wrote that you have this, you have this, you have this, I want to take this, I want to take this. But there wasn't like I am going to do this for you,
Right.
right? And I wasn't aware, like as I said, I didn't know that I have to say that, see, I have these qualities, this is something I'm going to bring in your community, right? These things were completely missing. But this is something that I learned from Applicant Lab, that hey, you just don't have you have to sell yourself. You have to say that, hey, I am the one who is master or champion of this thing, and who is going to bring this thing to your school, right? So this is what Applicant Lab really helped me in. And then I realized that you have already, so even if you're paying those $2,200 or just a few bucks or $300, I think I paid $270 with some
Yeah, was
promo
it
codes.
10%? Yeah. There's a lot of these 10% off codes sort of floating around. So yeah, you probably
Yes,
you
yes.
probably found
So,
one.
so yeah, so it was around around 10% of what I paid this year. And if I talk about my success rate, it was 0% last year. If and this year I got admitted to three business schools with a very good scholarship. I have a wait list from three, and I'm very positive about those three. And so it's not about the money. It's about, you anyways have to do the work yourself, right?
Right.
You have to do the work yourself. Then why? And it may happen that like if I just remove that money factor away, the consultant last year, he didn't even tell me that you have to include these factors. He didn't even provide me any direction, any path. So if and this is what Applicant Lab helped me, right? So I can confidently say today that if I would have joined Applicant last year, at least I would have got a direction to where I want to go. And last year I was like, just he just said, go to the ground and do whatever you want to do. This was nonsense, right? This year I had a very very specific path, that okay, I want to go here, I want to write the essay of this particular school, these are the things I need to include. And I had sanity checks that, hey, is my essay including these particular points? If no, then it's a bad essay. If yes, Is it very specific? Are you telling about whether you're going to contribute to the school, or you're just going to take the things from the school? So this is how I feel that applicant lab was much better for me.
That is great. I am so happy to hear that because I work, I've spent years developing Applicant Lab. I didn't just sort of come up with it and then launch it overnight. And all of these different steps that you talked about. When I first came up with the idea for the product, it was much simpler than it is today, and it was only working with people and iterating through that I realized that all of these different steps, if you do the foundation, because I think sometimes people, they might try out Applicant Lab and they might do the trial and they might say like, oh, I don't know, it seems like the program's asking me to do a lot of work. Like I have to do a lot of thinking. I need to think about all these examples from my life and so first of all, I think one of the important points you made is that first of all, doing that thinking is crucial because first of all, you might have an amazing leadership story that you might not have thought of originally, or maybe you weren't technically in charge of something, but you still demonstrated amazing leadership skills. And until you really assess all of your different stories, you might not know which ones are the most valuable. So first of all, you want to think of as many stories as possible. Also, there's a lot of, it's not just about the essays, right? You're also going to need for most schools 2 letters of recommendation, an interview. In the interview, they're probably going to ask you 4, 5 behavioral questions. Like you're going to need a lot of stories to pick from. And then also once you think of them all and you've sort of analyzed them and really thought about like, okay, what branch rate does this story really tell about me? Then when you go on to working on several essays, it makes it that like doing all that foundation work really pays off because then that way you're like, oh, it's Kellogg. They're asking for a teamwork question. Boom, like here's my best teamwork story. Oh, this other school is asking for an innovation question. Boom, here are my 2 best innovation stories. And so it just makes, it's like there's so many things in life, right? If you set that strong foundation, you're going to be thankful for it later on because it is going to make the process better and faster. So I designed it with this in mind, and I get really excited when I hear people say like, yeah, that's actually what it did. Like, it really did that. And I'm like, oh, great, good, whew, that was the whole point. And so, and I also like that you brought up the point that, hey, like with a consultant, you're going to have to do all that work anyway. So you might as well, if you're going to do the work anyway, you might as well be doing it with the guidance and the step-by-step guidance and the checklists. Yeah, and I have several steps in there where I'm like, okay, like let's just review, like let's just make sure that you actually are submitting that strongest version of your story. So I'm really excited that the lab was able to do that for you, and that you were able to to
Yes.
gain admission and to get all these interview calls and to then convert so many of them into acceptances. Is pretty, it's a pretty cool feeling for me. That's why I do this. And I'm really excited for you because I know, especially after having had that disappointment last year, to have this result this year is pretty nifty.
Yes.
So what would you tell Abhishek, what would you tell someone if someone is sort of on the fence about Applicant Lab, or maybe they have never really heard of it before and they've just encountered it? Uh, what would you tell them to try to convince them to try it out?
So, yes. So I would say spending just a few dollars would not be too much for you. But trust me, you will realize that even if you're spending those $1,000, the information, the material you are going to get in Applicant Lab will not be given by those, big consultants, those big dollar packages that you're going to buy. So I would say one should buy the Applicant Lab at least, even if the person is joining a consultant, one should buy the Applicant Lab at least to make sure that whatever the pointers, the sanity checks have been suggested by the Applicant Lab, are all the essays that you have written meeting those steps, right? And to be honest, I personally, I feel you really don't need any admission consultant if you want to reach that destination. It's anyways, you have to do the work yourself. So if you really want to reach that destination, reach the destination using the tool. I can promise you that you will never be demotivated, or you will never be like sad, like I was last year, saying I didn't receive any admission. Yeah.
Right. That's great. And that's a really neat point. I think a lot of people say like, it's funny. I actually had someone say in one of the reviews that I recently read of my own product, they were like, "Oh, I had actually been planning to hire Maria for additional, I'd been planning to use the Applicant Lab as like the foundation, and then hire like Maria or hire someone else for additional services. But then I realized I didn't need them. Like I got to the end and I was
Yes.
like, oh, I don't even need to spend this extra money. And I liked your point of, even if you are using a consultant, the quality level of these consultants can vary tremendously. There are some people in this field who are excellent, they are experts, they really are good. But there are also a lot of people in this field who maybe aren't as great. And you, as a client, really have no way of knowing which person you're getting because you're not the admissions expert. So if they tell you to do something, you don't know if it's good advice or bad advice. And so with
Yes.
Applicant Lab, like one of the cool things is even if someone is using an admissions consultant, they could buy the Applicant Lab. Like let's say they're spending $3,000 or $5,000. For an extra $300, you could just double check that advice. You could just say, well, but I think because I believe you shared with me the resume that this consultant had helped make for you last year, and at the top it had like a summary of qualifications, or it had one of those
Yes.
one of those things that I tell you in Applicant Lab, like don't waste your space. Don't have like a statement of objectives like my objective is to get into business school. Like, yeah, no, we get that. You're applying. We understand that that's your objective. Like, you don't need to waste the space with the objective. And so like that way, even if you would have been using that consultant, and even if that consultant would have been great with other things, you could have double checked it against the resume module, and maybe you would have said like, huh, maybe I don't need an object, or whatever statement of purpose or whatever it was at the top. Um, and so that's great. I think some people I think a lot of people can use the lab and they don't need any additional help. That's sort of my goal for the product, is for it to make it constantly iterating it and constantly improving it, to that it gets to that point. But even if somebody is using a consultant, they can still the lab can be a great complement to that.
Yes.
So that's a cool thing. Great. Do you have any final thoughts or any final words?
So I would say, don't think about it, go ahead and just buy
All right. Excellent. Concise. A clear call to action.
it.
I like it.
Yes.
All right. Well, excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Abhishek. Congratulations
Thank you so
again
much.
on getting into your schools. And yeah, please, if you do somehow make it to LA as part of your travels, as you're landing in the States, if you have like a layover in LA, let me know, and
Sure.
I'll come say hi to you in person.
Yes.
All right, excellent. Thanks so much.